Hey everyone, it's Mr. Gerald here, back on track with episode 2 of season 2 of Another Point of View. Let's get the ball rolling with what's happening now. Sort of. I decided to avoid certain major current events that made bigger headlines this past week due to most of those stories still developing. Panama Papers! Oh gosh, sorry about that. Don't know what came over me there. But yeah, today's story is about the country of Thailand. What's going on in Thailand, you might be wondering? Well, let's start with some backstory. Let's start in 1932, just prior to the onset of the Second World War, when a group of military and civilian officials forced the king of what was then known as Siam to grant the people a constitution. This bloodless revolution brought about the end of centuries of absolute monarchy. In 1939, the Kingdom of Siam was renamed to Thailand. During World War II, on December 8th of 1941, the Empire of Japan invaded Thailand after being refused passage into Malaysia by Thailand. After hours of fighting, the military dictator of Thailand at the time, by the name of, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Plaek Phiban Songkhram, whom I shall refer to simply as Phiban from now on, negotiated an armistice. Thailand and Japan then signed a military alliance agreement, and in 1942, Thailand declared war on both the United Kingdom and United States of America. That's right, Thailand was on the side of the Axis powers during the Second World War. As the Allied forces made gains in 1944, Phiban was ousted from power in the government and replaced by a lawyer by the name of, I'm going to mispronounce this also probably, Kuang Afewong. Just prior to the Japanese surrender in 1945, the new government of Thailand withdrew from territories it had taken from the British in East Asia and ordered disarmament of any Japanese soldiers in its territory. A move that surprised the Allied forces, but the British were not keen on letting Thailand get away with its role in helping the Japanese. However, the United States of America, basically not fond of European colonialism, decided not to treat Thailand as a defeated enemy and instead supported the new government. Thus, Thailand received little punishment for his role in the Second World War. In 1945, an individual by the name of Sini Pramoj became Prime Minister of Thailand, and upon reaching power and a symbol of restoring the monarchy, he named the country Siam again. And in December of 1945, the young king of Siam, Ananda Mahidol, returned to his country from Europe. But he was murdered just 7 months upon his return in June of 1946, under suspicious circumstances. Due to suspicions of involvement by the government officials in power having been a role in the young king's murder, confidence in the civilian government floundered, and in November of 1947, seeking to capitalize on this, the army seized power. And upon doing so, they brought Phiban back from exile. Once in power in 1949, Siam was once again renamed Thailand, this time permanently. Now, you might think to yourself, Phiban, the guy who was leader of Thailand when it sided with the Axis, no way the US would support his government. Wrong, because his rise to power coincided with the onset of the Cold War, and a communist government being established in North Vietnam. Seeking to have allies in the region, the US supported Phiban's government. This led to a period of prosperity in Thailand, as trade and foreign aid from the US led to Thailand's population diversifying, westernizing, and urbanizing. Phiban, however, found himself losing his leading position in government to a young field marshal named Sarit Thanarat and a general by the name of Thanom Kittikachorn. Both were Thai traditionalists and sought to restore prestige to Thailand's monarchy and thought rule by the army was the best way to ensure order. During the Vietnam War, after the French withdrawal and American forces entered, Thailand formally allied itself with the United States. Meanwhile, domestically, Thailand's population began to boom and saw a rise of an increased standard of living, and many people moved from rural villages to cities, above all to Bangkok, which saw its population rise rapidly. However, not everyone saw the economy prosperity come to them. Rural peasants grew increasingly dissatisfied with their condition in society and became disillusioned with the central government. In the 1970s, Thailand saw many peasant revolts occur, though none of them were greatly successful. Seeking to pacify them, the government established a committee to hear peasant demands and grief. However, these demands were viewed by the government as unrealistic, and there were too many petitions brought forth to the committee to address. By the 1970s, it wasn't only the poor rural class which had grown uneasy with the government, but also the middle class and educated upper class, which had gained a political awareness and sought democracy. The King of Thailand began to openly criticize the military junta in power, and student demonstrations began to occur in the country asking for a democracy to be established. On October 14th of 1973, a student revolution occurred, when many students marched onto the streets and the military, in response, rolled in tanks and started gunning them down. In order to fight back, the students commandeered fire engines and trucks and rammed them into the tanks to halt their advance, and the King of Thailand at the time opened the palace gates to students who were being gunned down. The king condemned the military for their actions, but he also condemned the students as well, and had General Thanom resign as prime minister. This revolution was followed by a period of unstable democracy. That is, until another bloody military coup occurred in 1976. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Prem Tinsulanonda in 1980, Thailand saw a process of democratization occur under the watch of the king and Prem. It did see a small moment of uncertainty in April of 1981 when a group of junior army officers, popularly known as the Young Turks, staged a coup, but they quickly lost support when the king continued to support Prem. The Young Turks decided to settle on a deal with Prem, and what was known as the April Fool's Day coup came to an end. Seeking to further government inclusion efforts, Prem recognized the Communist Party and granted amnesty to guerrilla factions in Thailand as long as they disarmed and swore allegiance to the government of Thailand. Prem eventually stepped down from power after losing re-election in 1988 to a former general by the name of Katache Chunhaven. Katache proved himself corrupt, and the military junta ended his reign in a bloody coup. Seeking to keep peace, however, the junta installed a civilian prime minister who put forth straightforward anti-corruption measures that proved popular. By this point, I would kind of hope you get the general pattern of Thailand's history. So let me summarize the next 25 years to bring us up to speed on Thailand's current situation. Thailand had democracy from 1992 to 2006, until in September of 2006, the Prime Minister, Thaksin Shinawatra, dissolves parliament and becomes head of a provisional government. This leads to a military coup, which in December of 2007 restores a civilian government. The new Prime Minister faces protests in 2008 for his connection to the previous one, and in August of 2008, violent anti-government protests occur. A constitutional court dissolves the three political parties that formed the Thailand government of the time, and in July of 2011, the general elections are won in landslides by the Pheu Thai Party. Finally, bringing us up to speed, this government was overthrown by the military junta in 2014 following student protests. Since then, Thailand has been under martial law, with a nationwide curfew, political gatherings being banned, and internet censorship being imposed. Why am I talking about Thailand today? Because in recent days this past week, the government granted sweeping powers for military personnel to arrest and detain anyone suspected of one of 27 crimes, thus furthering the process by which Thailand moves yet another step closer to a military dictatorship. What are my thoughts on all this? It's really quite simple. People of Thailand, get it together. You're starting to look like North Korea. Now then, enough of that. Time to discuss why nature hates us. Snakes. Did you know approximately 50,000 people die per year worldwide from snake bites or snake attacks? Just to give you a bit of background on snakes, there are two types of ways that they kill. The first type is venom from a snake bite, which is generally used to kill prey, or constriction. However, depending on the size of the snake, they might just eat the prey alive. Snakes inhabit all of the 7 continents. That is, except for Antarctica, because it's so freaking cold up there. If we're being totally honest, if you have a fear of snakes, you pretty much have to live somewhere with notoriously cold weather, because snakes are pretty much everywhere except in places where winter isn't just a small inconvenience. Of Of course, when it comes to human casualties, a large portion of deaths from snakes is from poisonous snakes. Which brings me to the reason I'm discussing them in this segment. Snakes are kind of dangerous. Hell, even the ones that aren't poisonous still possess really sharp fangs that will inflict grievous wounds, and if large enough, can suffocate you to death, which is why I would advise you to seek medical care immediately if you suffer from a snake bite. Some of you might be thinking, well, obviously, that should go without saying. To which I say, you would think so, but wait until you hear what happened recently. This past Monday, April 4th, Indonesian singer Irma Buell, age 29, decided to do a musical performance in the village of West Java with a king cobra. The cobra was supposed to be defanged. It wasn't. And its mouth wasn't closed with duct tape either. Yet despite this, she was told she could wear the snake during the performance. This proved a recipe for disaster, when the singer, during her second song, stepped on the snake's tail, to which the snake responded by biting her in the thigh. Now, before anyone cries foul play, there was a snake handler present with a venom antidote on hand, but the singer decided to continue performing for 45 minutes before she collapsed due to effects from the venom. She suffered from vomiting, seizures, and was taken to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival. Tragically, her death leaves her husband a widower and her 3 children motherless. Her death is under investigation by police, but moral of the story, snake bites are dangerous, especially those done by king cobras. Don't treat them lightly. And as always, the king cobra, a menacing creature, is just another example of how nature hates us. Time to wrap this up with a segment I call, Here's a Recommendation. Today's recommendation is a poem. Now, I'm not one for verse, but this one truly gets to me. The poem is called To the Virgins, To Make Much of Time, by Robert Herrick. And if you'll allow me, as is becoming a habit of mine when it comes to poetry I recommend on this segment, I'd like to read it for you. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he is to setting. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent, the worse and worst, time still succeed the former. Then be not coy, but use your time, and while ye may, go marry, for having lost but once your prime, you may forever tarry. Now, poetry can be interpreted in many ways, but I personally interpret the poem to be a message of making the most of your time on this earth, and really finding that special someone, while in your prime, to enjoy your best years with them. Then again, that's just my interpretation. Feel free to read the poem yourself, link in the description, and give your interpretation. I'd very much like to hear it. That's all for this installment of Another Point of View. Now then, let's go seize the day.
Carpe diem, seize the day. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Strive to find your own voice. Seize the day, look at it in another way. Carpe diem, seize the day. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Strive to find your own voice. Seize the day.
We are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Words and ideas can change the world. The powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. The powerful play goes on.
Just try to avoid marrying the wrong person while you're out seizing the day. Because, wow, that would suck.